Yeah, this is the part where if there was people listening, they'd say you can't say anything right now. So I'm going to be as judicious as I can.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's great to have you. And I'm here with Michael Guth, the dynamic CMO of Spectrum Reach. It's good to have you here, Michael.
Good. Remains to be seen about dynamic, but it's great to be here with you as always.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this one because over the flourishing Spectrum Reach relationship with Waymark, we've had a chance to spend a decent amount of time together. So I know
Yep,
this will be both interesting and entirely off script. So I've already thrown that away, and we can just get into it, why don't we?
I like it. Made everybody nervous, but I think we're going to forge ahead. Let's do it.
Yep. So let's start off straightforward. I think just setting the stage a little bit is good for those people who don't know. Can you just tell us quickly what is Spectrum Reach doing? What are you
Yep.
doing there so we know the basis?
So in a nutshell, Spectrum Reach, is the advertising arm of Charter Communications. So what does that mean? We're in 91 markets across the country. We have about 30 million high quality addressable households with about 90 million customers and about 500 million devices. We are the largest in our markets from a multi-screen video standpoint. You look at traditional linear and streaming, and it's not just the streaming that we do on our Spectrum TV app, but it's also the partnerships that we sell in the market at DirecTV, Verizon, Pluto, so on and so forth. So all that combination of sort of scale, reach, and data puts us in a really unique position to create and optimize solutions in a world that's very, very complicated. My role is I oversee marketing, both on an enterprise level and on a hyperlocal level as well. I have a group that does marketing research and insights, a group that does category and client development, a group that does larger brand marketing and strategy. I have a kernel in-house agency group that Waymark knows very, very, very well.
Very well. Amazing. Thank you. Concise and informative. Maybe just a little bit more you want to tell us quickly about your path here. How'd you end up doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Most of my career has really been in sports and entertainment, but more specifically around figuring out ways to tell simple stories about complicated problems such that consumers can do more of what they want to do, or customers do more they want to do, and make money doing that. So I worked at the New York Mets at a time when it was really about how do you shape that story? How do you sort of connect the passion of the consumer to their passion for baseball, and how do you bring advertisers into that? I worked in brand marketing at Coca-Cola for a long time, launched a number of products, worked on Sprite when we had the NBA for the first time, repositioned Sprite, launched Dasani, launched a brand called Surge. I did a number of things there. Again, how do you sort of take a product that at its time had no real sort of functional value, but more represented what your brand was all about? How do you sort of connect that story in interesting ways? I've worked at Madison Square Garden for a long time, was involved with the transformation of the building. Again, how do you sort of tell this complicated story? I worked in Nashville, I ran the Grand Ole Opry. Again, how do you sort of take this passion for country music and tell stories in different ways? And so I was doing all these different pieces, and I got a call about Spectrum Reach, which was not sports and entertainment, which was not sort of venue related, yet it was all about connecting consumers, in this case our customers, through the passion of video and entertainment to help them drive their businesses at a time when the business was going through dramatic change. It continues to go through today, where you have sort of the traditional linear business, you have the streaming CTV business, you have increasing competition. And so how do you take all of this stuff with a background of advertisers that are very sophisticated, large holding companies or small mom and pop businesses? How do you tell a story that's consistent, simple, and actionable? And so that for me was what really attracted me to the opportunity, was how do you take this mess called television advertising and tell simple stories and sort of demystify what can be confusing and intimidating to people.
Oh, but yes, a lot of threads that we should pull there. I mean,
Huh.
simplification, the changing landscape, a bunch of things that we should tap into. But I think maybe just before we really dig in there, just finish laying the groundwork. I mean, maybe talk a little bit about the Spectrum Reach Waymark partnership and how that's evolved over these past few years. And I think we can tie that into all these topics that you just hit on.
Well, Funny you should mention that. No, there's look. It's one of the most exciting partnerships that we've had, quite frankly, and I think for two reasons. One of which is uh, everything that we're trying to do is to simplify confusion, to harness the chaos, to sort of democratize television advertising for every single customer. Advertising was something that Waymark was thinking about, which brings me to the sort of the second point,
Right.
which is Waymark has been an incredible uh, partner in terms of collaborating and challenging and working together. And I think in order to improve these days, you've got to find partners that you can work with, grow with, push each other to make each other stronger. And what we've seen from those early days to today is a commitment, similarly, to simplify what can be confusing and challenging to consumers. And it's been really exciting to see it work in action.
Yeah, and I think that's representative of the way that you've approached AI in general. So maybe even just zoom out from Waymark. There is all this pressure to AIify things, and what are you
Yep.
doing with AI? How have you been able to bring such a practical approach to where and when to apply?
Yeah, I think for my part, it's not there is no pressure from an
Great.
AI standpoint. I think I say the same four or five things over and over again because I believe them. But when you focus on what the outcome is, you
Hmm.
focus on what you're trying to accomplish, it becomes very easy. And so for us, our challenge as it relates to creative is to simplify that process and take away as many barriers as possible. You're going to look at every way to do that. And in some cases, it's working with the kernel team to really optimize in a local market basis based on the customers that are best equipped to take on a full television commercial, right? And television production. And so it's not for everybody. And so making sure that we're thoughtful and purposeful in how we allocate our resources from that standpoint. As it relates to using AI and using technology to create commercials, there's a recognition. This is something that you always say. I know we'll talk about meeting consumers where they are. And I think we haven't been cavalier at Spectrum Reach or at Waymark to think that every single person, just because they have a tool, can create a great commercial. And we figured out ways to sort of modify that along the way because it wasn't about the AI. It was how could AI and any other tool or any other way of allocating resources could help us get to our end goal, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yep. 100%. And I think what is interesting, part of why our partnership has evolved, but I think it applies across a lot of different use cases, is you've got these two really quickly changing landscapes. You've got media in general. There's a lot of change, and then you've also got this kind of very nascent but rapidly evolving side of AI. And so it's kind of like, okay, new problems are arising, potentially new solutions. I think a lot of people are trying
Yep.
to see where do those two intersect. Maybe beyond the Waymark world, is there anything where you kind of got your eye on it? Where you're like, seeing this challenge evolving or an opportunity in the changing landscape, and I maybe am seeing, I'm looking for solutions and I may be exploring AI based technologies. Maybe some are working, maybe some are not quite there yet.
Yeah. I think a lot of what we've been talking about is the use case of let's take a very specific challenge in terms of advertising, which is a television commercial and how you create those different pieces. But if you sort of pull the lens back a little bit, and you think about selling advertising, right? My noble task is to help small businesses, business of all sides, become effective through the power of the television advertising that we have. And so you take the customer journey along the way and what is valuable. So the first is they need to be aware of us. And once they're aware of us, they need to be able to answer the questions, is it simple? Does it work? And so, the way that we think about technology is can we be smarter prospectively at anticipating what a customer values as simple, what they value as work, so that we can sort of optimize our messaging in advance. And so things like AI and machine learning, others, there's lots of different things out there. They're sort of cool about prospecting and understanding and curating your messages and sort of learning on what works along the way. The second part of does it work is when you take our inventory, our owned and operated inventory, and then the inventory that we represent in the marketplace, which is in combination larger than anybody else's when it comes to premium video. How do you optimize the results based on that particular condition? How do you take each of those different
Hmm.
discrete pieces of inventory across 91 markets against a specific category at a specific time of year that has a specific need what is the right optimal solution, and how do you learn from that and grow from that, so the next time you're not just sort of reporting on the back end, did it work or did it not? You're prospectively on the front end saying, this is going to work in this way because we've done this thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Every one of those places, AI and machine learning can play a role.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. And I think there's something that you use the word simple a lot, and I love that. I think that that can sometimes get confused, and we see this in our own product and customers as well. There's not always a one-to-one mapping of what is simple and what is time consuming.
Right.
If you had any, I just wonder if you might have any good nuggets there of things that you found where it's like, okay, I was able to simplify this for the user.
It's a really good point. It's because I don't use, when I say simple, it's efficient is actually not the first word that would come to
Mm-hmm.
mind. To me, it's as much about language. When I think about simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
let
Mm-hmm.
me figure out, which is ironic since I'm going on and on in this conversation. But ideally, right, simplicity is, how can I articulate a point of view that's of value to you in as few
Mm-hmm.
words as possible, right? It's hard to be simple. It's hard to articulate a point of view and differentiate yourself in the marketplace and create value with an economy of words. Simple is also, we want to be as efficient as possible. Our media landscape, you've got traditional linear television spots, you've got streaming. And so forget about social and search and things like that. You just take sort of premium video, it's chaotic in the marketplace. Everybody is sort of yelling. Everybody is offering different points of view. There's all sorts of optionality. There's different ways, there's different currency to measure. Data is hard to get at from a first party standpoint. How do you sort of do customer data matches? There's so many different pieces. And so, how do we tell that story in as simple a way as possible? And so, you'll,
Mm-hmm.
you'll hear me in presentations talk about harnessing chaos. I'll say simplified fragmentation. We talk about, is it
Mm-hmm.
simple, does it work? Because it's all about, look, most companies could care less about their media plan. What they care is, does the media plan work? Right? They care, is it driving whatever that business is? Do you want to drive to your website? Do you want to drive to your store? Do you want to create some awareness? Do you want to be known when you go to the coffee shop? Are you trying to drive a sale? You're building long-term awareness. You don't care what the solution is. You care that it works at a price point that you want. And so the more that we can share, we got it. We
Yep.
have the inventory, we have the data, we have the thousands and thousands of campaigns, we have the ability to help you develop the creative against that specific need and that specific condition. Just tell us what you want to do and how you want to transact, and we'll do it. That's when we talk about simplicity, or how it comes together in a compelling way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think something I'm noticing as we're talking too is, how you get things across. There's this big thread of how do we get this across to someone who's a smaller business or maybe doesn't have that sophistication and knowledge. You also have this really robust background with the biggest brands, obey your thirst, Sprite
Yeah, yeah.
scale type of
Nicely
content.
done.
Oh yeah, I love that campaign. And part of when we talk about AI and all this is about democratizing, which is really, can we bring that big brand experience to
Yep.
that local mom and pop? I'm interested what if you feel like I'm really doing the same thing for these larger business as best as I can for local businesses, or are there differences in how you go about thinking about one versus the other?
That's a great question. I think ideally it's the same thing, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
trying to create compelling media solutions that are going to drive an action. Some of the words and some of the context and the way that we talk about it is different. And so, we will segment customers based on what they value. Some, you can
Mm-hmm.
imagine those that are looking for social clout chasers and how you position versus someone who is looking for the lowest, most efficient price versus those who are looking for innovative new approaches. So there's ways that people value different things. But the way we tell our story to smaller brands or larger brands, we use some different words. And so we use
Mm-hmm.
different ways of sort of articulating it, but it's all for the same end, right? The outcome is the same. The words that we use and what we simplify, what we tell in different ways changes, right? And so we'll sort of toggle depending on the size of the customer and what they value, because it goes back to, is it simple, right? Is it
Yeah.
simple to a large brand? It's different than is it simple for a small brand.
Yeah, actually, the way you just said that is kind of a light bulb for me too. Typically, I think for larger brands, you're doing more. more and more different stuff than you necessarily could for a smaller brand. But actually, the way you just mentioned it, it's like we're actually doing more. We're doing the full end to end for these smaller businesses if we can,
Yep.
as things become more scalable. We need to put that really simple cover on it so that it's, you don't have to worry about all that,
Yeah.
but then you're actually breaking it out.
No, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in my career, I've always found it's the smaller brands that require more than the larger brands. The
Mm-hmm.
dollars are bigger, right? The
Mm-hmm. Right.
expectations are bigger in terms of output, but in terms of the relationship, the depth of that interaction, it may seem counterintuitive, but it's certainly been my experience.
Yeah. And it seems like the dream of tech, including but not exclusive to AI, is all of those components can be equally good no matter how big you are. And it's really just a
Yeah.
question of how much
But again, it
excellence.
really depends on, yeah, but it really depends on the questions that you're asking at the beginning. We talk about AI, we talk about technology. It's only as good as how the end user is using it. I think in AI with Waymark, one of the things that you and I have learned along the way is most of the stuff that we do together is touched by our in-house creative, is touched by our sales team, because we've learned that not only is Waymark and the creation of commercials effective for customers, it's a really effective sales strategy to really be able to show people what's possible. We all remember when you're in a car in the suburbs and you're leaving town and you're in traffic and there are those billboards, for real estate saying you could be here, and you could sort of visualize those things on a billboard. I think when our salespeople can say, this is a commercial that we could create, we've already created for you, that we could now go to market tomorrow if you want to, is incredibly powerful. Having somebody who is an expert at creating commercials and using the Waymark tool to partner with a new prospect has been equally as successful, and sort of understanding, what's going to work and why and for what purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. We're flying through our time here. I want to make sure to touch on that. You alluded to it earlier, but the idea of meeting the technology where it is today,
Yeah.
and I think that goes back to our conversation about solving real problems and being very practical and disciplined in the approach. Can you just talk a little bit about how you think about that?
Television, people's familiarity with television and media, there's a wide spectrum of knowledge and level of comfort. People's acceptance of technology and understanding and level of comfort is equally broad. And you've got to get to those tipping points where you get enough people with a high enough level of comfort to sort of help and teach others. That's where you really break through. And I think what we saw and
Hmm.
what we see with television commercials is there's still a little bit of intimidation. And so to just put it out there and hope that people will figure it out on their own seems a bit silly when we have such great expertise at both of our companies to help get those early adopters out there. And so the idea of acknowledging that and offering services to help a small business work through that first commercial and show them how to do it real time, it's extremely powerful. And it's really changed the way that we've thought about Waymark in the last couple of years, creating that solution, really scaling that sort of assisted service, if you will, along the way is proven to be very, very effective. Because as you know, you can create a commercial in under 3 minutes, and I would say it's probably pretty good. But if you have the right person framing at the beginning, it will always be good. And not only will it always be good, they could take that 3 minutes and do 100 of those commercials a day, as opposed to someone who's doing it for the first time is going to optimize one or two of those things over the course of a week. And so then you can begin to see how we can really scale this. And then if you do that over and over and over and over again, businesses become more comfortable. They start to do it on their own. They start to tell other people, and then you really uh, get some scale and some traction. And so that's what we've been seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. And I think that assisted service model seems like it's really taking hold, not outside of Waymark, just as more and more, especially streaming inventory becomes available, and you're seeing this influx of new advertisers who are thinking about this platform in a way that they hadn't before, that is really helping people get from, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, but I'm interested to, all right,
Yeah, well,
jump
look, I
there.
mean, people, just because there's a tool out there doesn't mean you know how to use it or you're going to be comfortable with optimizing it. And so
Yep.
one of two things will happen. Either people will say, I'm really good at this, I'm going to figure it out. There will those will say, I'm
Yep.
not so good, I'm going to try it, I'm going to get frustrated. right? Or they're going to say, I get it, but I'm kind of intimidated, so I'm not going to do it. And so when
Hmm.
you bring someone in and say, let me help you, let me sort of work through this with you, let me show you, let me demonstrate, the
Yep.
results are remarkable and not surprising, right? It's not that surprising. These are new, exciting technologies, but they're intimidating. And by the way, even more so when it's your business that you're putting in television, which still is big brands do television, it's scary. And so creating that assisted service there, or even as you're sort of modeling the optimal media plan, you can do a lot of these things online and do self-service tools, but you're going to feel more comfortable when someone is giving you a light touch, and then slowly taking those training wheels off, and then you get the confidence to sort of do it on your own. It scales from there because we've helped them along the way. You're going to have a higher sense of attachment and affinity to us, and you're going to see a greater sort of adoption and building that relationship and less churn because we've helped you help yourself. But it's a process, and I think, as I said, you've been really good in Waymark, especially at figuring out ways to sort of bridge that gap.
On that note, it was just kind of evolving and learning as we go. Got to ask what's coming up new. What should we be on the edge of our seats for coming out of from Spectrum Reach?
We're going to stay focused on what we're most proud of, and that is really number one, being the premier solution for video in the local markets. However, wherever and whenever. I think we're going to continue to evolve to get better to understand what people value on the front end. And so you're going to see more and more iteration on how we become that. Is it simple? Does it work from a local market basis? And I think on a national enterprise basis, in terms of those that are looking for solutions for us from an enterprise piece, we're going to be as easy and as flexible and maximize the options so that you can transact in the way that you want to transact. So bread and butter is really optimizing on a market by market by market basis and creating those hyper local solutions, either hyper local for hyper local purposes or hyper local at scale. And we see a really exciting future with Waymark and how we accomplish both of those things.
I love it. Is it simple? Does it work? That's it. Michael, thank you so much. This was fun as expected,
You bet.
and looking forward to everything that's coming from you and that we're doing together. So thanks again.
Likewise. Likewise.